Hello, everyone, and I hope you're all well. My name is Tanner Dagenais, and I'm the host of Self-Sabotage Solutions. On this podcast, it's my opportunity and my pleasure to be able to share everything I know about self-sabotage, but also to be able to share other people's self-sabotage stories, because it's so important that we know that no matter who we are, where we come from, or what we have experienced in life, that we're all able to overcome self-sabotage. So I'm very grateful and very happy to have author and freedom from self-sabotage coach Sabrina on the line. And Sabrina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Can you please just introduce yourself a little bit, and we can kind of go into your story and where you were experiencing some self sabotage in your life?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sabrina Goldlin, and yeah, I've started my journey on self sabotage like about a year ago, when I came across Jason Christoph's course, and my partner introduced me to it, and he was very hesitant about showing me that because he thought that I wasn't gonna like the stuff that he's all about and all that. But then I saw the course and I was reading about it, and I felt this shiver of joy running over my body. I'm like, yeah, this is the universe's response saying, yeah, this is what you gotta learn. So yeah, here I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like when I saw Jason's, like, well, actually, I just saw some of his posts, and I was just like, it all makes sense now. Like what I was going through and like the struggles I was going through. I was like, I thought there was something wrong with me for the longest time. Like I kept sabotaging myself, and then I was like, it makes so
Right.
much sense now that there's like another part of my brain I
Yeah,
didn't even know
yeah.
about.
I felt always like there's like a missing key point to
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do. So about a year and a half ago, I kind of spoke out to the universe and I said, I want to like do some kind of a course, either become a psychologist or take some classes or become something else on the side to what I'm doing as a profession. And I wanted it to have something to do with the things that I've experienced in my life, which I know so much about, so that I can use it to somehow help other people go through their struggles. And the course I looked at was like $20,000, and it was in BC. And I'm like, how am I ever going to pay for this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then I said, well, what I want to pay is about $2,000. And sure enough, that course that I came across was $2,000, right? At the time, and I'm sure now it's more, but at the time it was 2,000. I'm like, well, this is just fitting in place, like perfect puzzle pieces, right? So yeah, it's pretty
That's
awesome. And I
awesome.
learned all the things that I needed to learn. And sure enough, it was those key points that I was missing that helped me understand myself better. So my journey, I always struggled with understanding myself
Mhm.
because nobody ever explained anything about the things that I experienced. And even a psychologist didn't really fully explain certain things about what I'm experiencing. And maybe 2 years ago or so, I was starting to write in a book collaboration with Jerry Wiska, the Why guy.
Mhm.
And he helped me figure out what my deeper why is, which is I exist to inspire greater understanding. This is my why. This is what drives me to research, to do things, to help other people. And so I wrote already in two of his books here, which is I Know Why, and the other one is The Bigger Story. And each time I write, it's like there's more coming out of me, and I have better and greater understanding of what's going on. So the last book was actually this one here, wrote about my experiences as a child, and my experiences more as an adult, remembering the things that I experienced as a child and putting the puzzle pieces together and figuring out my truth, even though nobody else was admitting to it, nobody else was talking about it. And I was just kept like, it was just all pushed under the rug, right? So I had to become detective myself and figure these things out. That's what I wrote about in this book. And yeah, here
Yeah,
I
that's
am.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's so important to be able to do that work for yourself and
Right.
kind of know like what you went through in your childhood and like how it's affected
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
now. 'Cause, yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of self-sabotage, right? Is those things that in childhood, because when we're children, we get that we're in like that theta state, and we are constantly learning and picking up and making our programs that we're running in adult life.
That's right. And it's because as children, we always say that children are like sponges, right? We know that the subconscious picks up on so much, like, I don't know what it was, 2 million pieces of information per second, but a child, it's even more than that. So in your childhood, your blueprint, your subconscious blueprint is created, and you're running under that blueprint, right? It doesn't mean that you can't change it, but you can't change it if you're not aware of what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awareness is a very important step of
right.
overcoming self-sabotage. I definitely agree with that. So I guess if you're comfortable sharing some of it, like what kind of things did you find, and like, how were those things affecting you in your adult life?
Well, a couple of years ago, went through a divorce. I was married for 14 years. And at the time, when I was still married, towards the end of my marriage, which was kind of rocky, but I fell in love with a different man. And it was a very addictive type of relationship. And so I didn't realize this until a couple years later, when I had memories come back from my childhood of getting sexually abused as a child over about, I would say my estimate is about 18 years. So during my whole childhood. And not until the abuser moved out of the house when I was 19. That is basically when it stopped. And that's when I left as well. And during that time, there was other people that were abusing me. There was another man that I had totally forgotten about that was abusing me when I was maybe 5 years old, and for a couple of years, but not constantly. He would kind of like come to town every year or 2 years, and then I would be brought there and he would sexually abuse me. And the interesting thing is that this man looked, talked, walked, and even was born in a similar area of the world as that man I fell in love with while I was married. So he was acting the same, he talked similar, he was love bombing me, he was treating me like a little princess and all these things. But see, I didn't remember that these things happened to me. It was totally blanked out. And so when I remembered it, finally, I realized why I had this very addictive love relationship with this man when I was still married, and why that it took me a couple of years to be able to actually let go of that addictive love. It was really hard to let go of because, love is kind of like, it activates the same receptors in the brain as when you're addicted to heroin or addicted to sugar. It's really hard to break that cycle or stop that because it's so addictive, right? And anyways, eventually it happened, and you start to learn and understand yourself and why that these things are happening to you in your life. And you grow and you become an adult, and it does. This whole process helped me to grow up. I realized that before that, I never fully grew up. So I had a lot of missed opportunities where I could have become an adult before I was turning 36. At 36, I finally was becoming an adult. And you think at 20 years old, you should be an adult, right? But most people never really make that process. I know people, they're 40, 50 years old and they still have childhood-like behavior. And, I wouldn't say never. They may be able to grow out of it. There's a chance they can do that. But if you're not willing to work on it and look at your issues, then that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of professional teenagers is what I think Jason calls them. And
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
term because it's so true. Pro
Yeah.
teens.
So it's so true. And it's so funny because when I came to Canada 20 years ago, and my partner at the time, he had a lot of friends still because he grew up here. And all these guys were all single guys, that were smoking weed and drinking on the weekends. And none of them was ever really able to hold a girlfriend for any longer than maybe a couple months, And I could see, now that I'm looking at it, I see this childhood behavior in them, like written all over them. But at the time, it's just normal, and you just kind of are a part of it, and you start to copy and emulate that behavior as well, right? Because that is what happens when you are surrounded by people like that. You're going to copy and emulate to fit into that kind of behavior and that kind of surrounding. And so I see my own self-sabotage in that, because maybe I would have never made that step to actually go and have an affair with somebody if I wasn't in that setting where people didn't have boundaries, they weren't respectful, they didn't respect themselves, you know what I mean? So I wasn't really in the surrounding or with other people that were adults. So yeah, but it's once you understand how self-sabotage works and you understand how the subconscious mind works, everything will start to make sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, your surroundings are so important, and
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize is like the TV counts as your surroundings, right? How much
right.
television did you have in your childhood, and you still watch television now?
Well, in my childhood, actually, television was very limited. I had like half an hour max a day, sometimes an hour. So nowadays, kids watch way more TV, and especially their gadgets and social media and all that. And we now know that the subconscious can't differentiate between real life and screen life. It takes what you feed it, right? And it's interesting because my parents somehow must have known, because how else, why would you limit it? They knew that it was doing something to the subconscious mind of people. Maybe they didn't have the words to explain exactly what's going on, but they knew. And I feel that as time goes on, people are getting more looser and looser and looser with those rules, you know what I mean? And so people are more and more exposed to social media and TV and screens and all that. So people are much more programmed nowadays, I think, than back when I grew up as a child.
Oh yeah, you'll see like toddlers, like 3 or 4 year olds with like their own little tablets, and they're just
Yeah,
zoned into the screen for
yeah.
hours.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that's definitely very powerful. But that is awesome that you had that limited. I know that could be a big source of contributing to self-sabotage. Um, I know for me, like eating healthy was really important. Like changing what I was eating was very important. How did you used to eat, and did you make any changes? Are you eating a different way now, or?
Yeah, well, actually, growing up, I grew up in Switzerland, and my mother was a homemaker. So she always made lunch for us. We walked home from school for lunch, and there was very little fast food when I grew up. There was no such thing as McDonald's until I was maybe 16. So I wasn't really too exposed to this kind of way of eating that I found very prominent here in Canada. I was a little shocked when I came here.
Yeah.
Tim Hortons and burgers and things. I'm like, you guys eat all that? Well, no wonder you're fat, like,
Mhm.
because where I came from, you would rarely ever see a fat person or a big person. And now a little bit more, because they have included more fast food like they have here in America, but not the same way. So you can kind of tell the difference. My best friend, she as soon as like I said, I'm going to go over here, and a couple of years later she saw me, she's like, you haven't gained weight, because she expected me to gain weight being
Mhm.
over here, but because that was not my programming, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I did not gain a lot of weight at all. So I didn't really have to fight or struggle with that. However, what we were exposed to a lot was chocolate, because Switzerland is famous for chocolate and
Mhm.
cheese, right? So the chocolate and cheese is a little bit my kryptonite. That is what I'm still fighting a little bit. I'm really good already at it, but I have my moments where, I still dip into the chocolate. So
Mhm.
got to remind myself that there's caffeine in it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about the caffeine there.
Yeah,
What about coffee? Because I know coffee is probably pretty popular like, all around the world.
right.
Was it pretty prominent in your life or
Well,
not
yeah.
really?
Well, a couple of years ago, I had quick coffee, and the reason was that was before self-sabotage, and the reason was because at the time I had a spiritual awakening, so I was seeing like symbols, and I asked angels or my guides questions about things that I needed to heal my trauma brain and all these things. And they told me at the time to use ginkgo, so I saw like a ginkgo leaf.
Mhm.
And then I saw a coffee cup with a red an X through it. And so I took that as I got to take ginkgo supplements, and I can't drink coffee. So I
Mhm.
stopped drinking coffee because of that. And a couple months later, started again because my partner was always drinking it. So you get very easily back into it when other people around you are doing it, right? And then it was not until, when was that? I think a year and a half ago when I decided that I needed to quit coffee again. And that was again before the self-sabotage teachings, because I felt strongly called that caffeine is a big problem somehow, and it's causing issues with my ability to visualize and see things. And because I was doing readings at the time, like mediumship, and I'm a Reiki master as well. So I was doing a lot of intuitive work. And I felt that it was somehow interfering with my abilities in some way, form, or shape. And sure enough, later when I was learning about the self-sabotage teachings, I finally had the reasons why that it is causing the problems. You know what I mean? Yeah, so we always usually know intuitively what is right and what is wrong, or we are able to receive information, and then the logical reasons behind why that is may not always come at the time, right? Because we always like to say spirit doesn't have words. They usually show us imagery, or they tell us something as in we have an inner knowing about something, but there's usually no words. And so it can give you symbols of why, but it's usually too complicated for you to understand just seeing symbols. It's got to be simple, right? And so when later on you find out the reasons or scientific reasons, or you watch a video or somebody's explaining what is causing the actual problem with the caffeine and the coffee, then finally you have this aha moment. Oh, this is why they told me I should not drink coffee, right? So yeah, so it's a very interesting experience with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you were
Yeah.
like had those visions. Do you think that the visions are kind of like similar to like the gut feeling, like the instinct? Is that kind of like the same thing as,
Um,
or
it's interesting because I just talked to my client about this actually, because I used to back in the day say that there's lower intuition, there's higher intuition. The lower intuition to me isn't really intuition, it's more fear response, which has to do with the subconscious, right?
right.
And then the higher intuition is higher intelligence, comes from the crown chakra, which is the awareness, inner knowing, understanding the truth, things resonate, that is that, right? And then, so there's a difference between the two. So yeah, so you got to be aware that your fear is not intuition.
Yeah.
It's not true intuition.
Mhm.
So a lot of people think they're following their gut and their instincts, but meanwhile, they are self-sabotaging.
Yeah, they're just following their fear.
Right.
Yeah, fear is definitely very important to address, and fear and
Yeah.
stress kind of pretty interrelated there. I feel
Right.
like so many people are stressed out or in a constant state of fear because of the television or the whole COVID thing, or
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
things always being like blasted on full blast on
Of
us.
course. Yeah.
So what kind of things do you do to kind of relieve stress or like address your fear?
Yeah. Well, what I do usually, I try keep myself away from the things that I know would stress me out. So it's been really hard with COVID because it's everywhere, and you literally would have had to shut down your social media and TV and everything. I don't have TV, but the kids, we still have like Netflix, which I hate. But it's kind of hard to get away from it if you guys want to, like, you want to sit down and watch a movie on an evening when you're tired, you don't want to do anything else. But the way that I watch movies is different nowadays than what it used to be, because now I'm watching for all the programming. I'm watching for the red and blue colors, and I'm watching for the background. What are they being shown in the background and all that, because I know that goes into the subconscious mind, right? So no, what I like to do, because I think after I went through the whole thing with remembering my trauma, I realized that it's so important that we connect with ourselves every single day, that we shut everything out, that we sit down, that we communicate with ourselves. that we check in on ourselves. You know what I mean? Meditation is really good, right? So I try to meditate as often as I can if I have a moment. Then I write, which is a nice outlet of letting things out and putting your thoughts into words. And yeah. And yeah, and I work out a little bit. I've taken back up a little bit of yoga. I like to go for walks and bike rides. My partner lives up north, so he has a nice cottage. So whenever I can, I go up there.
Kind of
Get
escape the
myself
city.
into nature. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really cool. And really like a really good way to reconnect with yourself is taking that time to actually connect with yourself. Because I think so many people kind of work all day, they get home, they make food, watch Netflix for the rest of the day, or scroll through social media for the rest of the day, and then they go to bed,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
wake up and do the same thing over and over, and they
yeah.
don't ever
And
take
your
that
days
time.
just pass you by. Like suddenly you're 70 years old. I'm like, what did I do with my life? I wasted it. So I don't want to be there, so I want to do something with my life.
Totally agree. Now, another part of I think overcoming self-sabotage is just like addressing your overarching like thoughts, like you're having
Mm-hmm.
negative thoughts towards yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good enough or things like that. Like, in my background, I am enough there. So, did you ever like how were you with like, negative self-talk, and what kind of steps did you take to address it, and why was that important for you?
It's very important. Yeah, because I had lots of negative thoughts in my head for many, many years. Beliefs that I'm not good enough, beliefs that I always got to be in control of things, situations, myself. I got to appear perfect so nobody has anything negative to say about me. Beliefs that I can't do things, that I'm not able, that I was a very insecure person for most of my life until I was about 30 years old. And then I started to slowly thaw and open up a little bit and become a bit more comfortable in my skin. And I feel it's probably because I was a long time away from the environment that made me feel very self-conscious when I was younger. And usually when you take yourself out of the environment that was unhealthy for you, where you had to hide yourself, you begin to thaw after a couple of years. You start to open up and realize, oh, it's actually not that dangerous anymore. I don't have to protect myself anymore that much. I can be a little bit more authentic in myself, right? And then the more that you thaw, the more comfortable you get with it. And so yeah, and eventually you arrive at a place where you start to remember the reasons why you even started to become uncomfortable in your life. Why? You put the puzzle pieces together. Suddenly you have memories come back of something that happened when you were a child. And you're like, oh, this is why I always believed this about myself. Or this is always why I felt uncomfortable in my body, or why I didn't have any boundaries, right? Because I was taught that I'm not allowed to have boundaries. And grown-ups can do whatever they want with me. And I have no right and no say over my life. So that's the beliefs that I always had. And for many years, I would say it started when I was about 18 until I was about 34, 35. I had struggled with bulimia. And this was just a way for me to control my environment and control how I felt in my body. And it took a couple of years until I realized that I was actually doing that, and yeah. And eventually it just kind of dissipated because I was, once you understand why these things are the way that they are, or why you feel the way that you do, the problems usually start to dissipate. They start to kind of go away because you're like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore because it's not the truth, right?
You're
Yeah.
having that conscious awareness of what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
That's super important. Um, I had something in my head for a second, but now I'm blanking on it. Okay. Um, yeah. So yeah, changing your thoughts is so important. Um,
Mhm.
So there was, I know you started like bringing conscious awareness to it. Were you doing like any other techniques? Were you like creating affirmations? Were you doing like any vision boards? Were you doing anything like that? Like any hypnosis,
Well,
anything like
I
that?
remember the first thing I started doing when I realized that I had like a narrator in my head that was telling me what's going to happen and that I'm not going to be able to do this and all this negativity in my head. I decided, and nobody taught me this, but I decided that I'm just going to tell it to F off. Every single time when I hear the negative thought, I'm going to tell it, you go F off, and I pushed it away, right? And it actually helped me enough to get to a place where I felt good enough about myself that I could call it back and ask it and say, so why are you saying that to me? Why am I feeling like this? But I first had to kind of free myself from all the negativity. It had to go so that I could breathe again. Right. And then once I was able to breathe again, then I started to kind of sort through this stuff and ask questions like, why am I thinking that? Why am I feeling like that? Right. And then I asked myself, so what is the truth? What is actually the truth behind of all of this? Right. And then the other thing I did is I did do affirmations. I don't remember what book I was reading, and I started doing affirmations a couple years ago. And I started writing them on little sticky notes. Like I wrote down affirmations on sticky notes and hung them everywhere where I would see them, like on my fridge, my front door, my mirror in the bathroom, and places. And every time I saw it, I would say it out loud to myself 3 times, and I would hold my heart and say it out to myself. And I feel at the time, this made a huge difference. It really did.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I know
Yeah,
how important affirmations are because it's one of the ways we can reprogram our subconscious mind, right?
that's right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome, and that's such a good
Yeah.
idea, putting it different places and then repeating it
Yeah,
three
where you
times.
can see it, right? And that was before the self-sabotage stuff. So I didn't understand at the time that the repetition, seeing things repetitively and repeating things is actually going to reprogram myself. I didn't know that, but I felt that this is going to help me. So I just did it. You see, like you can trust your instinct as well, because you already know, because all that you need to know is already inside of you. It's already there, right? It's just that when we do the self-sabotage teaching, it helps us understand why that is. And that's why it's so powerful, because it's much more believable and much more powerful when you understand the reasons why behind the whole thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I know that was a big change for me when I was going through it because I was like, I know what I need to do, but like I don't understand like why I'm not able to do it because
Mhm.
I kept sabotaging myself. Like I'd want to start drinking or you know
Yeah.
or sorry, I would want to stop drinking, and then the next day I'd find myself with some alcohol in my hands. Like, what am I
Mm-hmm.
doing? Like, I thought there was
Yeah.
something wrong with me for a long time. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
finding that information, like really understanding it, like the why, like why it happens, and learning about the
Yeah.
subconscious mind is so important.
Yeah. Definitely.
Let's see. Is there anything else you want to share about your story or that you can think of about self-sabotage?
Um, Hold on. Let me look at the little notes I did make.
Or we can talk about your some of your books that you wrote as well too.
Yeah, because technically, what I wanted to maybe talk about, I've mainly already talked about. But what I was sharing, I just wanted to say that that our subconscious mind is extremely powerful. I mean, if it can hide things and memories from you because it deems it to be unsafe for you to know about, right? So people sometimes say, oh, nothing happened to me. I never experienced trauma. No, whatever, whatever. But they're exhibiting the whole array of issues that comes with hiding trauma like sexual abuse in childhood and all this stuff. It's kind of funny to me, and I never say anything, but yeah, I thought that once too, and then suddenly, boom, all this stuff comes back, right? And basically because my subconscious mind felt it wasn't safe for me to remember it or know it. And so it's that powerful that it can make you not remember very significant things from your life, right? But on the other hand, it's also that powerful that it can literally help you remember everything that you need to know. So it goes both ways. So when you're ready to know the things that you need to know so that you can move forward in your life, you can access everything, and you can simply ask for the reason to be revealed or the memory to be revealed of why this, that, whatever, right? And then it will come back. It may not come back immediately because it's shoved down so far, right? You have to dig it out, but you can ask yourself the question, and then with full intention to want to know. Like, you can tell yourself, I want to know, I'm ready, like I'm a grown-up, it's time, like I got to know the truth, right? And so it can take sometimes a couple days, couple weeks, couple months, but it will resurface. And the issue sometimes is that people don't pay attention to it when it surfaces, because they think it's just a dream or like a dream-like sort of a memory. Because when you push memories away for that long, when they resurface, they're not appearing like regular memories. They appear like dream-like memories. So it almost feels like it's sort of like a daydream. You know what I mean? Until you allow it to come back in your conscious awareness and you start to allow it to come back, the more it comes back, the more you look at this, the more it becomes real again. So that's really important to mention as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I don't think I've experienced something like that where I get the dream. I'll have to ask myself if there's anything I'm
Yeah.
holding on to
Yeah.
back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Without creating things, but you know the difference. You will know the difference between what is like more like an imagination or dream and what is an actual suppressed memory that tries to come back. Because the suppressed memory, eventually you will know that it's true. It's an inner resonance, and it will become more and more like you will feel that it is actually a memory. And the other thing, the imagination or dream, you will always know that that never happened. You can ask your inner pendulum. It knows what is true and what's not. So that was a little bit hard for me when I went through this stuff, to know what is true and what's not. So yeah.
Well, that's really powerful stuff. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that. Now, if there is one thing you want to leave with like the listeners today, what would that thing be like? And you kind of talk about a couple of things, but like, what do you think is like the most important thing? Like, if someone was listening today and there's gonna be, leaving, like, what should they be taking away from this?
Why they should we what? Sorry?
Like what should they be taking away from this? Or what would you
Away
want
from
them
this.
to?
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Well, I think it is really important that we work on ourselves.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So instead of watching TV every night on the couch, like take that course or join the Zoom call and learn something new, read that book, like I see my daughter reading these comic books at school. I'm like, why don't you read a book that teaches you something, or that's a real life story about something, like learn something. She's like, I'm learning in school all day. I'm like, yeah, but you're always going for the things that entertain you in your free time. But the trick is in life is that when you use your free time where you're not busy with working or being in a job or whatever, use that free time to actually do something productive for yourself instead of just seeking out the entertainment, because the entertainment is actually entrainment. And we got to remember that it's entraining you to think a certain way. And so we got to be very careful with what we choose as our entertainment. So,
Yeah, I totally
yeah.
agree with that. Yeah, that's so powerful. And yeah, I totally agree. I think the best investment you can make in your is like in yourself, because
Right.
our number one money making tool, our number one tool for change and just success in life is ourselves, is our
Right.
brain, and
Yeah.
so
Nobody else will do it for
yep,
you.
exactly.
You can wait until you're 67 years old and nothing will ever change if you keep going. The question is, if you're doing everything the way that you have been doing it every single day, where are you going to be in 20 years? So it's compounded,
Yeah.
right? It's just like when you put money away, there's compound interest. If you keep taking the money back out for entertainment, there's in 20 years, there's no money there. You're probably going to be in debt.
Yeah.
It's the same with self-work and with
Mhm.
creating your life, your business, whatever it is that you do in your life. You have to ask yourself, if I'm doing this habit every single day for 20 years, what's the outcome? right? And then you get rid of that habit and put something else there that is going to give you the outcome that you actually want. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for the listeners that want to find you, I'll put your links down below, but can you just kind of say like
Right.
where they can find you, what social media
Yeah.
platforms, or like I know you have a website as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a website called
Mhm.
movetheworldcoaching.com. So, yeah, I help people who are, doing their own businesses, or also people with, mainly the people that I'm helping is people who are entrepreneurs, who are maybe changing from being in a job for 20 years and going into their own business. I know there's a lot of struggles that comes with that when you're making that change, a lot of self-sabotaging behavior,
Yeah.
right? To move into a
Mhm.
completely new environment, a new tribe, and leave the old one behind. And yeah, so that's mainly what I do. I help people who are here to move the world in some way, form, or shape, if it's their own world or if it's the world in some other way, form, or shape. And people who have a big purpose or a calling, and they really want to do it and really want to make it. And these are the people I'm here to help.
Awesome. I love it. And if you guys are interested, please reach out or check the description down below, guys. I'll have her links down below so you can reach out to her. And Sabrina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was really a pleasure and really, really, really great speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
All right.